in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. My legitimate sister, Scarlet Gu, believed that the tragic end she met in her previous life was entirely because she married the wrong husband. In this life, she proactively yielded the position of crown princess to me, waiting for the day Crown Prince Arthur falls from power, dragging me down with him. Meanwhile, she willingly chose to marry the concubine, born prince whom she used to despise. She thought she could imitate what I did in my past life, wait for him to lay low, accumulate power, and eventually seize the throne. Sister, in this life, it's my turn to sit on the throne as the master of the imperial harem, Scarlet said, her voice dripping with absolute certainty. I simply held Arthur's hand, smiling without saying a word. Does she truly believe that someone so deprived of love, so insecure, and so twisted, who could carefully scheme his way to the throne like 6th Prince Damien, is actually a good person? When I first woke up, the first major news I heard was that my legitimate sister wanted to swap marriages with me. The elder should precede the younger. The position of crown princess rightfully belongs to my older sister. Scarlet, who had always been arrogant and domineering, said while kneeling obediently before Madame Gu. She explained that she wanted to exchange marriage certificates with me, so she could marry the 6th prince instead. Damien is exceptionally talented. Your daughter will not suffer by marrying him. I instantly understood. Just like me, she had been reborn. She definitely did not say that in our past life. The birth mother of Damien was merely a foot-washing maid. Years ago, when Emperor Q was still a prince, he got drunk and spent the night with that maid, resulting in Damien's birth. This scandal was seized upon by the emperor's rivals, causing a massive uproar. In the end, using the excuse that the maid had seduced a prince, she was beaten to death with a heavy cane right after giving birth to the imperial grandson, closing the case. Not long after, Emperor Qi ascended the throne. Damien, having lost his mother, could only be registered under Empress Q's name. He became a stain in the emperor's eyes and was raised in a secondary palace. Even when he reached adulthood, the emperor did not want to see him and hastily arranged a marriage for him. This marriage was accepted by my father, Lord Gu. Simply by helping the emperor resolve this awkward matter, my father was promoted 2 ranks in a row. When the news reached our estate, Madame Gu brought Scarlet and caused a massive scene. Crying, she blamed Lord Gu for sacrificing his daughter's marriage for the sake of his own career. Scarlet cried until she could barely breathe, swearing upon her life that she would never marry Damien. The two of them made my father so anxious he didn't know what to do, quickly turning to explain himself to Madame Gu. Scarlet is our only legitimate daughter. With such a noble status, how could I bear to marry her off to a stud born of a foot-washing maid? My father pleaded. The next day, my father called me before Madame Gu and announced that from now on, I would be registered under her name. From now on, you are also a legitimate daughter with your name in the family registry, he stated. The father who had always left me to fend for myself rarely ever smiled at me like that. Madame Gu also pretended to embrace me warmly. Luna's birth mother passed away early, she told my father. I've always wanted to raise this child by my side. Meanwhile, Scarlet, holding the marriage proposal from the Eastern Palace, hid behind the bead curtain and snickered. Wait until I become Empress, I will allow that bastard husband of yours, born of a maid, to officially recognize his ancestors. Luna, for such a massive favor, a lowly wretch born of a prostitute like you should kowtow a few times to thank me. She had sneered in our past life. She had ordered her servants to force my head down, slamming it against the hard floor, one heavy strike after another. The next day, Scarlet, with a grand red dowry stretching for 10 miles, was carried out of the main gates, marrying into the Eastern Palace with boundless glory. As for me, in a small, plain palanquin, carrying a bruised and bloody forehead, I entered through the side gate into the hastily built, extremely plain, and cold manor of the 6th prince. Yet now, this very Scarlet, who wholeheartedly wanted to sit on the Empress's throne, was willingly humbling herself to marry Damien, the man she always called a bastard. Madame Gu was burning with anxiety, trying everything to dissuade her, but Scarlet appeared absolutely certain. She leaned in and whispered a few words into Madame Gu's ear. Madame Gu looked highly doubtful, but seeing the resolute expression on her daughter's face, she pondered it over and finally gritted her teeth. If that's the case, then we will do as you wish, she conceded. Scarlet, thrilled, leaned into her mother's embrace and shot me a gloating look. I understood that smile all too well. She definitely thought that in this life, she wouldn't make the wrong choice again. In our past life, Madame Gu plotted for half her life to finally get my sister favored by the Eastern Palace. Cloaked in the Emperor's grand 10-mile red dari, she smugly sat in the bridal palanquin of the Eastern Palace, becoming the noble crown princess. Arthur was the legitimate eldest son of Empress Qi. His marriage was the most important event in the palace. Even the bridal palanquin was elaborately crafted with gold and jade. But not long after marrying into the Eastern Palace, the crown prince was accused of buying and selling imperial examination questions, using them to bribe officials and cultivate his own power faction. This was a capital offense. Right at that time, the top scholar of that examination year turned out to be Damien, who had disguised himself as a common scholar. Because he hid his identity to take the exam, he discovered the candidates colluding with Arthur to get the questions in advance. Emperor Q immediately tasked him with overseeing the investigation into the Crown Prince's case. Very quickly, he found out that the Crown Prince didn't just sell questions casually. The buyers were the descendants of high-ranking ministers. The charges were instantly elevated to forming factions and colluding with court officials, compounding his crimes. The emperor was furious, immediately stripping Arthur of his crown prince title and reducing him to a commoner. And Scarlet, as the crown princess, was naturally implicated, imprisoned for life in the imperial clan court. On the contrary, Damien's power rose rapidly like a ship on a rising tide. From then on, the emperor recognized his capabilities and increasingly relied on him. After the emperor passed away, Damien ascended the throne in accordance with the will of the people. On the day of his coronation, grateful that I had shared his hardships, he promised never to abandon me for the rest of his life and vowed never to depose me as empress. At that time, my sister, released for 3 days due to a general amnesty, stood below the hall, glaring at me with toxic resentment. 3 days later, she preferred death over returning to the imperial clan court, causing a massive scene, threatening suicide, and insisting on seeing me one last time. The moment she saw me, she lunged at me like a madwoman. Caught off guard, she stabbed a dagger straight into my heart. I never expected she would blame her entire downfall in her past life solely on picking the wrong husband back then. That's why in this life, she eagerly climbed into the small palanquin of the 6th prince, gloating as she watched me become the crown princess. She was absolutely certain that my triumph wouldn't last long. Sister, in our last life you stole my empress throne. Do you know how long and cold the nights in the imperial clan court are? This time, you should taste what it's like to beg for life, but not be able to live, and beg for death, but not be able to's hand. She had hissed. I held Arthur's hand, just smiling in silence. Does she really not think that someone so devoid of love, so insecure, and so stubborn, who could carefully calculate every step in the battle for the throne, is a good person? Lost in thought. What are you thinking about? Tell me. A gentle voice pulled me back to the present. I looked up, my heart nearly skipping a beat. Arthur stood tall and straight, his eyebrows looking as if they were painted, his eyes as clear as early spring water, curving into a smile. He softly called out to me, my wife. In the past life, Scarlet was left all alone in her room on her wedding night. Right after lifting her bridal veil, the crown prince was invited away by a courtesan from the fragrant pavilion. He didn't return until the next day, smelling strongly of rouge and powder. The whole world knew that the grand crown princess had her husband snatched away by a courtesan on her wedding night. Scarlet became the laughingstock of the empire. When Arthur returned to the Eastern Palace, he walked right into her crying and throwing tantrums, smashing porcelain. Before he could even speak, she threw a teacup straight at him, injuring his forehead. Upon hearing the news, Empress Q was furious and grounded my sister for 3 months. She was mocked by everyone top to bottom in the Eastern Palace. Yet right now, Arthur was smiling gently, looking at me beneath the bridal veil. My wife is so beautiful, he whispered. I smiled tenderly, while calculating in my heart. It was about time. Right on cue, a maid rushed into the room. Your Highness, Lady Mia from the Fragrant Pavilion has sent someone to invite you. The maid announced breathlessly. The crown prince took the invitation, examined it closely for a moment, and frowned slightly. He snapped the invitation shut. On his normally gentle face flashed a trace of anger, radiating the sheer authority of the imperial family in that instant. Your Highness, I spoke up softly. Only then did his expression soften completely, revealing a look of guilt. He hesitated to speak. I lowered my eyes, acting understanding, and said softly, Your Highness, if you have business, please go. As soon as the word, home, left my lips, his pupils slightly shifted. Wait for me, my wife, I will go and return shortly. As he left, he looked back 3 times and ended up leaving the invitation on the table. I opened it to look, instantly knowing my bet was right. The crown prince didn't go to the fragrant pavilion to dally with courtesans. Lady Mia was an agent of the Eastern Palace. With autumn approaching, many people with wicked intentions were already making their moves, buying and selling examination questions and offering bribes. One scheme after another. These men corrupting the exams were extremely cautious, moving like ghosts. It was incredibly difficult for the authorities to track them down, but there was only one place that could make those men unusually honest in the warm, fragrant embrace of beautiful women. Therefore, Arthur, who was in charge of reforming the imperial examinations, had planted his own people in various brothels, music houses, and theaters specifically to catch these cheaters. Tonight, a fish was going to take the bait. Scarlet, who had been pampered in the palm of their hands since childhood, had her eyes set higher than her head and was spoiled arrogant. She only knew that the crown prince was acting cold towards her, so she threw a massive tantrum. Naturally, this made the crown prince, who was already overwhelmed with 100 tasks at the time, even more displeased. I understood all these tactics. My birth mother was a courtesan. To survive, she did whatever it took. Later, she was forced into my father's bed by his very own enemy and became pregnant with me. She traded that enemy's secret for my life. As I grew up, I looked exactly like my mother. She once told me, a pair of beautiful eyes isn't just for enchanting souls, but for reading expressions and measuring people's hearts. I mastered both of those skills. Therefore, when Arthur rushed back to the manor in the middle of the night, he happened to see me struggling to stay awake. Waiting for him, I had removed my heavy makeup and changed into a thin silk nightgown, my slender figure leaning delicately against the chaise longue. As soon as I saw him, the corners of my eyes turned red, looking incredibly fragile yet making it impossible for one to look away. His gaze instantly shifted. When he embraced me, his clothes were slightly damp from the night dew, and a thin layer of sweat clung to his forehead. One look, and I knew he hadn't even bothered with an umbrella. Running all the way back here. My wife. With just that one phrase, I understood. That night my understanding and allure, my endurance and seduction. He wouldn't be able to forget any of it. When I woke up, it was almost time to pay respects to the Empress. The crown prince had already gone to the imperial study to handle state affairs and specifically ordered no one to disturb me. A senior maid beside Empress Qi also came to deliver a decree, saying that since I was newly wedded and serving the crown prince was exhausting, I was excused from paying my respects. But I insisted on going. The Empress allowing me to skip it was her grace, but if I actually didn't go, it would make me look utterly ungrateful. Sure enough, the senior maid revealed a look of approval. Pleased, she led me to the Phoenix Palace. Empress Qi was the one who valued etiquette the most. That decree was merely a test to see if I would become arrogant from being favored. Therefore, the moment I stepped into the Phoenix Palace, I knelt down with perfect composure. Even though there was no sign of the Empress in the hall. The Empress is still getting ready. The senior maid informed me. The time for getting ready had long passed. I feared the Empress was still testing my patience. I thanked the maid for her reminder and continued kneeling respectfully. Without showing the slightest hint of resentment, the approving look in the maid's eyes became even more distinct. Right at that moment, I heard the grating voice of Scarlet. Sister, why are you kneeling here? Did you act out of line and anger Her Majesty? Later, let me apologize to the Empress on your behalf. My legitimate sister, dressed in luxurious garments and her head covered in jewels, walked in with her head held high. Standing beside her was none other than Damien. He was just as he had been in our previous life, noble yet aloof, as bright as the crescent moon. Yet I couldn't help but draw a sharp breath. The phantom pains of his beatings and tortures from my past life seemed to crawl over my skin, piercing my very heart. Scarlet stood beside him, her girlish eyes full of sweetness, her face radiating pure happiness. But only I knew just how utterly ruthless he could be when he turned savage. Damien had been despised by everyone in the palace since childhood. Even lowly servants with just a bit of authority dared to beat and scold him. The first time I met him, I was only 8 years old. When I saw him, he was being viciously beaten with a rolling pin by the royal chef from the imperial kitchen. It turned out that, out of extreme hunger, he had secretly stolen a steamed bun and was caught. Thinking him pitiful, I ran over, traded the jade pendant I was wearing for the bun, and gave it to him. But on the day he ascended the throne, he brought this incident up again. Gripping my throat tightly, his eyes bloodshot, he screamed his accusations. Did you look down on me? Is that it? That's why you gave me charity with a single steamed bun back then, just to humiliate me. When I was being bullied by slaves as a child, you were laughing at me too, weren't you? He sadistically tortured me the entire night. By the next morning, my entire body was bruised black and blue, not a single inch of skin was intact. However, he didn't touch my face, because he still needed me to attend the Empress crowning ceremony, to play the role of a deeply loving imperial couple alongside him, in order to paint him as a wise ruler who valued loyalty and affection. Thinking of this, a violent shiver ran through me, and I nearly lost my balance. That slight movement was caught by Scarlet. Truly a lowly wretch born of a concubine. You can't even kneel properly, she scoffed. If you act this disrespectfully in front of Her Majesty later, won't you completely disgrace the Gu family? My eyes precisely caught a glimpse of a phoenix tail skirt sweeping behind the folding screen in the hall. Thus, I lifted my head, neither haughty nor sycophantic, and deliberately spoke a bit louder. Watch your words, sister. I married into the Eastern Palace under the status of the Gu family's legitimate daughter. Scarlet was, as expected, provoked. Do you even deserve to be a legitimate daughter? A lowly wretch born of a prostitute. If I hadn't lifted you up and had you registered under my mother's name, did you really think you had magically turned into a phoenix? Born a concubine's daughter, you will remain a concubine's daughter for your entire life. She didn't know that at this very moment, Damien was staring intensely at her, a dark shadow flashing in his eyes. I knew that every single word out of Scarlet's mouth was driving a dagger straight into his heart. Though I was not born of Madame Gu, I am no lesser than you, I retorted calmly. From childhood in zither, chess, calligraphy, painting, poetry, and prose, which of these can you compare to me? You still dare to argue back. Scarlet, accustomed to acting tyrannically in our estate, immediately raised her hand to slap me, but in the next second, her wrist was tightly seized. The one who intervened was the senior maid, who had been standing quietly all along. Behind her, Empress Q had been standing there for who knows how long. Damien hurriedly dropped to his knees and kowtowed, ignoring Scarlet, who was still restrained by the maid, struggling and crying out. Your Majesty, Luna was disrespectful to us first. We merely wanted to teach her a little lesson. Empress Q glanced at the senior maid, and only then was Scarlet released. She quickly plastered on a sycophantic smile and bowed to greet the Empress. But no matter which lifetime it was, she firmly believed she was destined to sit on the throne of the inner palace. Because of this, she had never truly bothered to learn the imperial etiquette properly. Compared to my flawless curtsy, her clumsy bow was nothing short of a comedic spectacle. Empress Q completely bypassed her and directly helped me up. Why is the crown princess dressed so plainly? The Empress asked. Her voice sounded like a reprimand, but her eyes held a distinct look of satisfaction. This was especially true when she saw the bamboo leaf, carved earrings I wore. Her gaze became even more pleased. Last night, I noticed bamboo leaves embroidered on the collar of the crown prince's inner robes. Arthur had said, Mother Empress loves bamboo. She admires its elegant and humble spirit. So I specifically had it embroidered to express my filial devotion. Today, I intentionally wore light, colored clothing, paired with a simple white jade hairpin, using the bamboo leaf earrings as the centerpiece. In stark contrast, Scarlet was draped in gold-threaded brocade, heavily adorned with pearls and jade. It was as if she wished she could pin every jewel in the world onto her head, gaudy and ostentatious. The Empress didn't even want to spare her a second glance. Yet, she smugly stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, my elder sister comes from a lowly background and has never seen the ways of the world, thereby offending your eyes. I beg your forgiveness on her behalf. As soon as those words left her mouth, everyone in the hall sucked in a sharp breath. She had completely forgotten that Empress Q herself was also born of a concubine. She had relied entirely on her own intellect and benevolence, rising step by step from the status of a concubine to the throne of Empress. Damien hastily tried to speak up, but was silenced by the Empress's sharp glare. The Empress smiled at Scarlet, asking slowly, Is that so? Do you believe that being born of a concubine is so utterly lowly? Scarlet, completely clueless, openly displayed her disdain. Concubine-born children are naturally of lowly status. How could they ever compare to legitimate ones? Your Majesty wouldn't know, but when I was little, I absolutely hated associating with my concubine-born sisters. None of them were fit to be presented in high society. Scarlet, shut your mouth. Damien couldn't hold back his furious shout, abruptly stopping whatever she was about to say next. Only then did Scarlet suddenly realize she had spoken out of turn. She shot a venomous glare at me. When she saw the slight upward curve of my lips, her hatred boiled over, looking as if she wanted to tear me apart with her teeth. I knew she was once again blaming the disaster caused by her own loose tongue entirely on me. Empress Qi took in the entire scene, her expression completely unreadable. She took a sip of tea. The moment she set the teacup down, the senior maid timely presented an exquisite brocade box. Opening it revealed a meticulously carved gold phoenix hairpin, heavily inlaid with rubies. This is an item bestowed upon me by the late Empress when I ascended to this throne. The Empress spoke gracefully. I find the Crown Princess very pleasing to the eye. Today, I grant this phoenix hairpin to the Crown Princess. Scarlet was so jealous her eyes looked ready to bleed vinegar. She watched helplessly as I accepted that priceless treasure. Unable to hold back, she shook off Damien's grip and threw herself at the Empress's feet. Mother Empress, I have also just been married. But the Empress had already stood up, brushing off her sleeve where Scarlet had just touched her. The sixth princess's head is already lively enough. Do you truly lack one of my hairpins for decoration? Scarlet went back to her manor crying. By the time I stepped out of my palanquin for my post-wedding home visit, she was throwing herself into Madame Gu's arms, crying her heart out. We are both princesses. Why did the Empress only grant her such a precious phoenix hairpin? She sobbed. Madame Gu was so busy coaxing her precious daughter that she even forgot to serve tea to Damien. It's simply because the sixth prince's words carry no weight before the emperor, so people look down on me. Otherwise, why would the Empress treat that wretched Lunagu so well? Damien keyed there as if sitting on pins and needles. When I walked into the room, I caught sight of his face turning completely dark. Never mind, it seems I came at a bad time, I remarked, walking in wearing a gorgeous brocade dress worth 10,000 taels of gold, leading an entire courtyard full of home visit gifts. Every single item was personally selected by Crown Prince Arthur, plus quite a few additional rewards bestowed by the Empress. If you compared Scarlet's petty gold and silver pieces to them, hers looked pitifully impoverished. The sixth prince's estate was practically empty to begin with, having nothing decent to offer for the home visit gifts. Furthermore, since Damien had lost so much face before the Empress yesterday because of Scarlet, things looked even more desolate. Some of those gold and silver pieces were even taken from Scarlet's own dowry to make up the numbers. Scarlet was so furious she burst into tears. Mother, look. She intentionally brought all this to show off in front of me. Had she forgotten already? This was her own choice from the start. Madame Gu's face darkened, and she pulled out the very same discipline cane she used to beat me with in the past. Get on your knees now, she ordered. Did she still think I was that concubine, born daughter she could trample on however she pleased? I let out a cold laugh. Mother, the one who should be kneeling is you. According to our dynasty's imperial rules, seeing the crown prince or his consort is like seeing the emperor himself. I am currently the crown princess, personally wedded by His Highness. Meanwhile, you don't even hold a noble lady's title. You should be performing the 3 kneelings and 9 kowtows, acknowledging the ritual of ruler and subject. Just now, you actually dared to demand a crown princess like me kneel before a minister's wife. That is treasonous and punishable by death. You're truly rebelling. Madame Gu sputtered. A lowly wretch born of a prostitute, how dare you speak to me like that? Today, even if the crown prince himself comes, I will use the family law and beat you to death, you rebellious daughter. Only then did Scarlet notice that the crown prince had not arrived with me. As if suddenly realizing something, she calmed Madame Gu down and, conversely, became incredibly smug. Luna, stop putting on the airs of a crown princess, Scarlet sneered. Being left all alone in your room on your wedding night. That taste wasn't very pleasant, was it? Do you think while the crown prince was having fun at the fragrant pavilion, he even cared about a crown princess like you? She covered her mouth and laughed, the jewels on her head shaking wildly. Madame Gu looked at her hesitantly. Letty, is what you said true? Of course it's true, Scarlet replied. Can't you see, mother? The crown prince didn't even come with her at all. She's been utterly despised by the crown prince, which is why she came here to flaunt her authority before us. Scarlet was absolutely certain that her predicament from her past life would be replicated entirely on me. Such a humiliating matter, she had to expose it fully to insult me to her heart's content. Sister, you'd best not speak nonsense, I warned. Seeing my hasty rebuttal, Scarlet thought she had stepped right on my sore spot and became even more gleeful. Big sister, don't be anxious. The way I see it, this is actually a good thing. The courtesans at the Fragrant Pavilion and your birth mother can be considered to be in the same profession. Just let your sisters at the Fragrant Pavilion serve the crown prince in your place. Then, big sister, you'll have plenty of free time. Isn't that wonderful? And what if I don't want her to have free time? My waist was suddenly grabbed tightly by someone. As I looked up, I saw Arthur smiling at Scarlet, but his eyes were filled with an overwhelming, heavy pressure. Your Highness. Scarlet stood frozen, her eyes wide, completely forgetting to even curtsy. Madame Gu, having never witnessed such imperial majesty, was so terrified she shrank straight behind Scarlet's back. The crown prince didn't even bother to look at them. He carefully took out two still, warm boxes of pastries from inside his robe. Here. Last night, my wife said she wanted to eat the osmanthus cakes from the East Street. I just went to buy some and brought them here for you. Your carriage was moving too fast. Thankfully, I managed to catch up, he said tenderly. Scarlet stared in shock as the crown prince held me intimately. No matter how you looked at it, he didn't resemble someone who had coldly neglected me on our wedding night at all. I almost let my wife suffer an injustice, Arthur said, his gaze instantly shifting. It turned icy cold as he looked at Scarlet. For badmouthing the crown prince behind his back, I will spare you for now, but for daring to be disrespectful to the crown princess, slap her mouth twice. By the time Lord Gu and Damien rushed over from the study, Scarlet's face was already swollen. The one who carried out the punishment was the imperial head eunuch bestowed upon the crown prince by the emperor. Every resounding slap landed without the slightest bit of mercy. Damien didn't utter a single word to beg for her mercy. He had always been like this, only acting gentle towards those who held value for him. Scarlet's sheer stupidity had caused him to lose face before the Empress. Right now, he couldn't even despise her fast enough, let alone plead for her. Even in our past life, when I lived so cautiously I barely dared to breathe, I was still frequently met with his coldness. My father was heartbroken but didn't dare say anything in front of the crown prince. He could only turn around and fiercely scold Madame Gu and Scarlet instead. However, the crown prince's anger hadn't subsided yet. Right in front of everyone, he reprimanded my father for failing to discipline his household and managing his family poorly, stating bluntly that he would report this matter to the emperor. This time, my father was truly terrified. Gritting his teeth through the pain, he personally took the discipline cane and struck Scarlet several times. I didn't want to bother with them, but I noticed Damien staring thoughtfully at the crown prince. Seeing that gaze, memories surged within me. I suddenly recalled that in our previous life, exactly on the day of the home visit, Damien had also noticed the rift between my father and the crown prince, and he seized that opportunity. He spoke with my father in the study for a long time, eventually reaching a transaction. In the past life, among the scholars caught cheating in the imperial exams by the crown prince were my father's protégés. If the crown prince investigated to the very end, he would discover that the umbrella shielding them was none other than my father. Using exam cheating to cultivate power factions was a hidden rule in the bureaucracy. At that time, once these people were exposed by the crown prince, the emperor would certainly not spare a single one of them. Therefore, when the crown prince brought my legitimate sister back for her home visit, my father brought out countless treasures of gold and silver, kneeling to beg the crown prince to leave a way out for his protégés. But the crown prince had a rigidly upright temper. Showing no mercy, he scolded my father right to his face, turned around, and left, leaving my sister entirely abandoned. Right at that moment, the sixth prince brought me back for my home visit. Unlike the crown prince, he lowered his imperial status, respectfully invited my father into the study. He said he had a way to save my father's protégés and secure my father's career, but the condition was that from then on, my father had to abandon the crown prince and fully support him in seizing the throne. Damien's method was simply to use me as a trade. The person assisting the crown prince with the investigation back then was the deputy minister of personnel, Horace. He was a man near 50, highly lecherous, and particularly fond of married women. I would rather die than submit. That was the first time I saw Damien reveal his fangs from beneath his mask. Anyway, your birth mother was a vixen. You surely aren't far behind, right? He sneered. He choked my neck tightly. I was nearly suffocating, and in absolute despair, I was forced to drink an aphrodisiac. Right before my eyes, that fat, bellied old man pressed his entire body onto mine. The next day, my father's protégés were quietly released. After that, Damien offered me up again, this time to the deputy examiner of that year's imperial exams. This man had a sick fetish for torturing women. Once again, when I was brought back to the manor, I was barely breathing, my back completely covered in dense, dark bruises. Interspersed among those wounds were the heavily guarded, top-secret exam questions for that year. Damien copied down these questions and sent them to my father. Because of this, in that year's exams, besides Damien taking the title of top scholar, every single one of my father's prized protégés saw their names on the golden roll. These people later became the core faction opposing the crown prince. Damien even copied the exam papers into multiple sets, deliberately letting a few street thugs pose as candidates to bring them into the examination hall. When the examiners discovered them, he immediately pinned the crime of selling exam questions onto the crown prince, completely burying Arthur's life. Sitting in the carriage, I leaned against the gold, threaded silk cushion that the crown prince had personally made for me, feeling its softness and comfort. The memories of being sold out by Damien in my past life still haunted me relentlessly, causing me to shudder consecutively a few times. Seeing my silence, the crown prince leaned in close and carefully asked, "My wife, are you angry with me?" "No," I replied softly, my voice low. Last night, I had already heard him hoarsely call out, "My wife," for the entire night. Hearing those two words again now, my face immediately flushed hot. But the crown prince assumed I was still upset over Scarlet's taunts. He hesitated to speak a few times before finally making up his mind. "My wife, last night I wasn't out seeking pleasure. I went to deal with those cheating in the imperial exams," was the crown prince explaining himself to me. I was slightly shocked. This was already a matter of the royal court. Since childhood, my father had always said that women must not discuss politics. It was precisely because my birth mother knew too many secrets that, after being fully exploited by my father, she was tortured to death by Madame Gu. Later, when I became Damien's Empress, I was grounded multiple times just for accidentally mentioning court affairs, entirely ignoring the fact that his power was built directly upon my dowry and my very body. However, Arthur was clearly explaining the current investigation into the imperial exams to me, even handing over the list of names for me to see. I closely examined the list in his hand. Within it, there were still a few whose backers hadn't been dug out yet, including my father's protégés. "My wife, look, I truly didn't lie to you." Arthur no longer possessed the majestic authority he showed when punishing Scarlet. On the contrary, he was looking at me with absolute grievances. His long, slender fingers held my fingertips, shaking them ever so gently. Only then did I realize he was still feeling wronged. I laughed out loud, holding his hand back. "I understand." Hearing this, a smile finally blossomed on his face, though it was hard to hide the trace of heartache in his eyes. "My wife, your days living at your family home were so difficult. Why didn't you tell me? I could have sought justice for you." Looking at his indignant expression, I found it incredibly endearing. His Highness the Crown Prince is busy with 100 affairs every day. How could I dare to bother your Highness with such trivial matters? For your Highness to protect me like you did today is already a massive debt of gratitude. But Arthur looked straight into my eyes and said seriously, "Your matters are the biggest matters of all." My heart stirred slightly. Across 2 lifetimes, no one had ever said such words to me. To survive in such an unjust world, I had to force myself to become hard as iron, never exposing a single weakness. Other than myself, I couldn't trust anyone. Yet at this moment, this heart that had already grown cold felt a trace of warmth for the very first time. "Your Highness doesn't know. I was born of a concubine, and my birth mother was a courtesan. And just because of that, they bullied you." The Crown Prince furrowed his brow tightly, his eyes filled with a mix of fury and confusion. He was born noble, and the Emperor and Empress were completely harmonious. He was a man who grew up entirely surrounded by love, so naturally, he didn't understand. Furthermore, the benevolent Empress Q had never been harsh toward concubine-born princes. Even Damien, the one most despised by the Emperor, was shielded by the Empress multiple times, even at the risk of angering the Emperor. She used to tell the Crown Prince that the 6th prince grew up without his birth mother and was not favored like him, and therefore he should be treated with more gentleness. Knowing the vastness of heaven and earth, one should pity the small blades of grass. The Crown Prince was the only prince willing to speak with Damien. He frequently brought him gifts and helped him punish the harsh servants by his side. Actually, when I was young, I often saw some servants mistreating the concubine-born princes, Arthur reminisced. Especially the people beside Brother Damien. When winter came, they wouldn't even give him heating coal. It even caused Brother Damien to catch a severe chill at a young age, and no one cared. In the end, it was I who went to invite the imperial physician to treat him. Arthur probably couldn't imagine, even until death, that the younger brother he had so wholeheartedly protected would later repay his kindness with pure malice. It was just that Damien's disguise was too perfect right now. If I hastily exposed him, the crown prince certainly wouldn't believe it, and it would instead alert the snake by beating the grass. I pondered for a moment, then said, "Since your highness pities the sixth prince, why not request a position for him before the emperor? Your highness is currently busy with the upcoming autumn exams. Wouldn't you really need another person to assist you?" The crown prince's eyes lit up. In the previous life, it was precisely because Damien remained hidden and nameless that he had the chance to strike a fatal blow. If he was left to hide in the shadows, it would be extremely difficult to grasp his weaknesses. The lower his status, the better he was at enduring silently. But once he gained power, his ambition would easily cloud his mind. In this life, I wanted him to expose his claws early, throwing his own battle formation into chaos. The next day, the crown prince immediately recommended Damien. The emperor found it inconvenient to oppose the crown prince, so he agreed, even adding that if Damien performed well, he would be given the position of deputy examiner. Damien was originally overjoyed, but the moment he heard that I was the one who pleaded for him, his face immediately darkened. I thought my royal brother valued my abilities. I didn't expect it was my sister-in-law taking pity on me. Truly, thank you, sister-in-law. Arthur remarkably completely missed the thorny undertone in his words, and casually chimed in. Your sister-in-law has always had a kind heart. There's no need for you to be so polite. Scarlet, meanwhile, believed she had finally not misjudged her man. Damien was indeed going to have his day in the sun. What did she know anyway? It must be that my husband is exceptionally talented and caught the emperor's eye. I knew early on that my husband was no ordinary man. His future is limitless, she bragged. She even threw a massive banquet at their estate to entertain guests. Damien was hoisted far too high by her. If he did well, it would be fine. But if he faltered, he would inevitably become a laughingstock. Returning to the Eastern Palace, I immediately urged Arthur to hand over a few important tasks to Damien. My wife, why do you care so much about Brother Damien? Arthur frowned, his face full of grievances. What about me? I've been back from court for so long, and no one has asked if I'm cold, hungry, or tired. Holding back a laugh, I quickly took off his outer coat, helping him change into his casual clothes. It's my fault. Please forgive me, Your Highness. Your Highness, Your Highness. Why are you still calling me Your Highness? I already made it obvious I was jealous of Brother Damien, yet coming back to the manor, all I hear is Your Highness. Your Highness. The corners of my lips curled into a smile. That night, I softly called Arthur my husband for the entire night. The next morning, I could barely get out of bed. The crown prince, however, was flush and radiant, leisurely heading off to the royal court. As expected, he handed quite a few tasks to Damien. Eager to prove himself, Damien took on everything at once, but at this point, he was still far too green. He didn't realize that many matters required high status and a vast network of connections, both of which he currently lacked. The crown prince assigned him a renovation project. The Ministry of Revenue, using the excuse of a depleted national treasury, dragged their feet and refused to approve the funds. With the emperor about to inspect the progress, Damien had no other choice but to dig into Scarlet's dowry. But it still wasn't enough, forcing him to run around scrambling for resources. Although Scarlet was deeply unwilling, thinking of her ultimate dream of becoming Empress, she gritted her teeth and endured it. With great difficulty, the Ministry of Revenue finally approved the budget, only for the Ministry of Works to claim that the price of timber had gone up this year. The silver was insufficient, so they delayed and refused to start construction. This time, no matter how much silver was offered as bribes, it was useless. Right when Damien was at his wit's end, I let slip a piece of information. The Deputy Minister of Works had long set his sights on the top courtesan of the fragrant pavilion, just lacking an opportunity. This was intel that Damien himself had gathered in our past life. Now, I was merely handing him back a convenient shortcut. The sixth prince immediately bought out the courtesan's contract, erased her lowly registry, disguised her as the daughter of his manor's steward, and offered her to the deputy minister of works. The very next day, the renovation workers immediately began construction. Back and forth it went like this. Scarlet was continuously pressured and coaxed by Damien, returning home to fetch silver time and time again. She had long since harbored resentment, because the gold and silver in their household had been nearly bled dry by Damien. But exactly at this moment, Damien suddenly understood a core principle: the things that can be used for transactions are not just silver but people as well. The next time I saw Scarlet, she had lost quite a bit of weight, yet her expression was incredibly arrogant. During this time, the sixth prince had completed quite a few tasks: repairing the examination halls, restoring the Confucian temple, and reviewing the candidates. His reputation soared like a boat on a rising tide. Everyone was saying the sixth prince was a buried pearl, his abilities not one bit inferior to the crown prince. The crown prince was even dispatched by the emperor to Jiangnan to handle a locust plague, while the sixth prince was kept by his side to oversee the setting of the imperial exam questions. "I came today to invite you to a banquet, sister," Scarlet said. She smugly thrust out her belly, even though her figure wasn't the least bit full. "I am already carrying the sixth prince's flesh and blood. The sixth prince is overjoyed and wishes to host a banquet next month to entertain guests. The crown prince has gone to Jiangnan to deal with the locust plague. Sister, as the crown princess, you absolutely must give us face and attend. It's just, sister, you've been favored for so long, why is there still no sign of movement in your belly?" The head full of jewels she used to parade around with was gone, replaced by only a few crude silver hairpins. I didn't rush to answer, merely taking a sip of tea before slowly saying, "I heard that last month, the sixth prince took you to the longevity banquet at the estate of the deputy minister of personnel, Horace. You stayed there until the next day before returning home." Scarlet's face instantly grew unnatural. She sat there as if pricked by needles, then softly cleared her throat. "Minister Wang's wife took an immediate liking to me, so she just kept me there to rest for a night." "Why bring this up, sister?" She hastily lifted her teacup, but I had already clearly seen the bruises from being beaten on her wrist. Sure enough, Damien had tasted sweetness far too early, so he had degenerated much faster than in our previous life. "Nothing, I was just asking casually." I deflected smoothly. "This is a joyous occasion. I will definitely attend the banquet." Seeing Horace with that fat belly again, I only felt nauseated. His filthy, naked gaze was glued tightly to Scarlet, a look of insatiable greed plastered on his face. Seeing me, his expression grew even more ecstatic. As expected of what the sixth prince said, Her Highness the Crown Princess and the sixth princess truly share some resemblances, making one unable to resist wanting to get close. Horace slurred. Everyone could see the blatant disrespect in his eyes, but he was an imperial envoy personally appointed by Emperor, strictly in charge of imprisoning and convicting those who cheated in the exams. The officials present all, more or less, had their weaknesses resting in his hands. Even Damien treated him as a VIP guest this time. Because Damien wanted the absolute support of my father and many other court officials, he still had to borrow the power in Horace's hands to sell favors. Because of this, Damien merely allowed the man's insolent gaze to roam all over my body, doing absolutely nothing to stop him from approaching. But I showed no mercy. Aiming straight for his fleshy face, I slapped him with full force. "Since you know I am the crown princess, you should observe proper etiquette. As a subject, when you meet me, you must step aside and bow. Otherwise, it is outright disrespect toward the crown prince." Damien froze. He had always assumed I was just a submissive concubine, born daughter, gentle and obedient beside the crown prince. He never expected that once away from the crown prince, I would be this domineering. Horace was knocked straight to the ground by my slap and struggled to get up. Around us, quite a few people chuckled at his pathetic state. He was mad with anger, pointing a trembling finger at me. You dare strike me?" he sputtered. "Minister Wang, please quell your anger. I apologize on behalf of my sister." Scarlet hastily rushed over to block in front of me, continuously winking and signaling Horace not to lose his temper. Right after that, she completely changed her demeanor, intimately linking her arm with mine and personally leading me to the seat of honor. She really knew how to put on a fake act. Was she afraid I couldn't tell this was a deadly trap? She was completely oblivious. I had long seen through everything here. After 3 rounds of wine, the sixth prince, Damien. "Sister-in-law, please do not be angry," he said smoothly. "Minister Wang did not intentionally disrespect you. This is premium Nuerhong wine, which I specially found to present to you. I thank you, sister-in-law, for speaking up for me in front of the crown prince that time. Damien signaled Scarlet to personally pour the wine for me. Oh my, she gasped. Her hand trembled slightly, and a whole cup of Nuerhong wine spilled right onto my dress. Why are you so careless? You've stained our sister-in-law's clothes? Damien scolded. Scarlet hastily apologized. Sister, please don't blame me, I didn't mean it. I will find a clean outfit. Please follow me to the guest room to change. So clumsy. Since I was a child, I had seen my birth mother use this exact trick against my father's enemies countless times. Whether in method or execution, she was vastly superior to Scarlet. I pretended to know nothing. I followed her into the guest room, where, sure enough, a change of clothes had been prepared in advance. This set is kept here just in case of any accident so you can change immediately. Sister, please make do with this. I will wait outside, she said. She left the room, and the outside instantly went dead silent. After changing my clothes, I took down the phoenix hairpin from my head and slowly adjusted my slightly messy hair. This phoenix hairpin was the very item the Empress had bestowed upon me back then. I intentionally brought it to make my noble status crystal clear. In the next second, the door was violently pushed open. Horace, reeking of alcohol, barged straight into the room. Your Highness the Crown Princess, this humble official has had a hard time finding you. He slurred. His alcohol-laced breath rushed toward me, but I swiftly dodged to the side. He let out a lecherous laugh, as if his interest had been piqued by his prey teasing him. What's this? Does the Crown Princess enjoy playing hard to get? You are much more interesting than your younger sister. His mouth was full of filthy words, his sentences laced with the dirty deeds between him and Scarlet. I warned him sternly. Insulting the Crown Princess is a crime punishable by death. I'm sorry, my dear good sister. Scarlet's voice rang out from outside the door. The minister has already said that only if he gets to intimately enjoy your beauty will he be lenient. To release father's proteges, as father's daughter, isn't helping out with this little matter the right thing to do. She had been sold out by Damien, becoming someone else's plaything, yet she still wanted to drag me down into the mud with her. I knocked over a vase, smashing it hard against Horace, making him stumble and nearly fall. Seeming to hear that I was still resisting, Scarlet laughed loudly outside the door. The wine he drank was already spiked with a strong aphrodisiac. Now, even if heavenly troops and divine generals descended from the sky, they wouldn't be able to save you. Scarlet, do you not want to live anymore? Daring to scheme against me, the Crown Princess, I shouted back. Stop acting like a dog relying on its master's power, she retorted. How long do you think you can remain the Crown Princess? The sixth prince is the true future ruler. Besides, if Horace got drunk, lost his mind, and assaulted the Crown Princess, what does that have to do with me? Scarlet believed too blindly in the destiny of our past life. She thought that simply by gaining our father's support, she had reactivated the predetermined trajectory of fate. Because in the past life, it was only after our fathers switched sides that the sixth prince's path to power became unobstructed. Therefore, she set up this chessboard, wanting to scheme against me to curry favor with Horace. It's just that she never expected that on this chessboard, I was not the prey. I gripped the phoenix hairpin tightly and lightly pressed the phoenix's eye. The sharp tip of the pin was instantly coated in a deadly poison. Just one drop was enough to take a life. I had waited far too long for this moment. I sat on the bed, pretending to be in a frantic panic, waiting for Horace's fat body to lunge forward. In the very next second, I saw a flash of sword light behind his shoulder. He let out a blood-curdling scream as blood sprayed 3 feet into the air, and then he fell flat on his back. Crown Prince Arthur held a longsword, looking coldly at Horace convulsing on the ground. Outside the door, Scarlet had collapsed onto the floor, her face drained of all color. I retracted the poison hairpin, my icy gaze fixed on Horace's twisted, twitching face. What a pity. Just a little more and I could have killed him with my own hands. But as I glanced at Arthur, I no longer had the heart to feel any regret. He looked as if he was about to shatter. The Crown Prince had used private lynching. By the time he walked out of the torture room, Horace had been tortured by him until he was barely breathing. Arthur's eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a demon crawling straight out of hell. It was Damien, he growled. Arthur had always been amicable with his brothers, yet at this moment, as he gritted his teeth and called Damien's name, it sounded like the king of hell calling out a soul. My wife, you knew all along, didn't you? Arthur pressed closer to me, step by step. From the moment you attended the banquet, you knew of their wicked schemes, right? Ever since you told me to recommend him, you already knew of his wolfish ambitions, didn't you? Amidst his bloodthirsty and ruthless expression, a layer of unspeakable pain gradually washed over him. Why didn't you tell me directly? Were you afraid I wouldn't believe you? Why did you have to use your own body as bait to draw out his true face? If I had been one step late. He couldn't finish his sentence. He pulled me into a tight embrace, applying force yet acting incredibly careful, as if he were holding a moon that could shatter at any moment. The heavy stench of blood on his body overpowered his usual faint cedar scent. His shoulders trembled as if he were about to collapse. I could only gently pat his back to soothe him. Regardless of whether he would believe it or not, I told him the entire truth of my past life. But after hearing it, he grew even angrier. Just because of that, just for the sake of my future, you threw yourself into such immense danger, completely disregarding your own life. Arthur had never lost control like this, but in the end, he slumped down exhaustedly. Luna, you are completely heartless, he whispered, his voice cracking. You have no idea how much I love you. Without you, what meaning does this emperor's throne have? He let me embrace him, burying his head into the crook of my neck. Never scare me like that again. That night, Arthur hugged my waist tightly, refusing to loosen his grip for even a single moment. I let out a soft laugh, allowing him to hold me, and asked when he planned to report Damien's collusion with the court officials to the emperor. Arthur scoffed. Report him to Imperial Father, and let him live the rest of his life peacefully in the Imperial clan court. It won't be that easy. Then, he used a freezing, utterly ruthless tone that I had never heard from him before. I want him to suffer death by 1,000 cuts and die without a burial place. The next day, the sixth prince personally came to our door to apologize. He said he had already ordered Scarlet to be grounded. He claimed everything was due to her incompetence in managing affairs, which gave Horace the opportunity to approach me at the banquet. The crown prince was as genial as ever, smiling as he helped him up. I have already killed Horace. It was his own evil doing. What does it have to do with you, Brother Damien? At this moment, I put on a troubled expression and spoke softly. Since both His Highness the Crown Prince and His Highness the Sixth Prince are here, I have a presumptuous request. When Horace plotted against me, he used my father's protégés as a threat. He said he was detaining quite a few of my father's prize students, using the excuse that they cheated in the imperial exams. My father has dedicated his entire life to the country and the people, and he values these students the most. If their crimes are not severe, could I implore both your highnesses to be lenient and release them? My father has been distressed day and night over this, and it truly breaks my heart. A flash of joy briefly appeared in Damien's eyes, but he immediately concealed it. It's not convenient for me to decide on this matter. We still have to see the Emperor's will, Damien said carefully. Horace was dead, and the person taking over the case was someone Damien didn't know. Just as he was having a headache over how to fulfill his promise to my father, he never expected me to proactively bring it up first. Arthur had long put on the act of someone so heartbroken for me that he couldn't distinguish right from wrong. Putting his arm around me, he declared, "It's just a few scholars. We will do as my wife wishes. Then, let's hand this over for Brother Damien to handle." Only then did the sixth prince leave happily. Very soon, rumors erupted among the commoners that the crown prince doted on the crown princess so much that he was shielding examination cheaters. I was summoned into the palace by the Empress. "Do you realize your crime?" she demanded coldly. I hastily knelt down to curtsy. "This subject does not know." The Empress did not tell me to rise, she merely ordered all the maids inside to withdraw. The hall was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Only then did the Empress look straight at me, her eyes piercing sharp. "Speak, what have you and the crown prince been hiding from me?" I stayed in the Empress's palace for a very long time, so long that the sky had already turned dark. When Arthur came to pick me up, he just happened to witness the Empress, who had always been tolerant and kind to me, flying into a thunderous rage. The Empress accused me of bewitching the crown prince and ordered me to return to the Eastern Palace to copy Buddhist scriptures to reflect on my mistakes. Arthur, who had always been filial, actually argued with the Empress this time, eventually alarming the Emperor himself. The Empress seemed incredibly aggrieved, listing our faults to the Emperor for a long time. When Arthur and I left the palace, we were both grounded for 3 months. 3 months was enough for Damien to do a great many things. I only hoped he wouldn't disappoint me. Sure enough, throughout these 3 months, Damien continuously mingled among the noble families and powerful ministers, busy beyond belief. In contrast, the Crown Prince immensely enjoyed his days of being grounded. With no state affairs tangling him up and overflowing with energy, he stuck to my room every single day, refusing to leave. The one who suffered the most was still me, unable to get even a single night of peaceful sleep. On the day of the Emperor's grand birthday banquet, the Eastern Palace's confinement was lifted. The princes, princesses, and officials of the 5th rank and above in the capital all entered the palace to pay their respects and offer birthday wishes to the Emperor. As soon as Arthur and I sat down, we could feel quite a few unusual stares directed our way. Not far away, Scarlet had grown even more haggard than before, lacking entirely the plump appearance of a pregnant woman. Yet, the smug and mocking look she aimed at me was completely undisguised. When it was time for the 100 officials to present their longevity wishes, the 6th prince made his move. He incited many officials, led by my father, to jointly submit a memorial claiming that the Crown Prince's virtues did not match his position and that his crimes were piled high. Damien, this is all your slander. If you have the guts, bring out the evidence. Arthur, usually so composed, was now furious to the point of losing control, flipping over his table, which immediately drew a harsh reprimand from the Emperor. Damien revealed a triumphant look. Royal brother, don't be so hasty. Right after that, my father submitted a letter detailing his own crimes. In the letter, he admitted that among his protégés, there were those who chased fame and profit, and had been arrested by the Crown Prince for cheating in the exams. However, the Crown Prince, wanting to curry favor with the Crown Princess, did not handle it according to the law and arbitrarily released them. This subject knows he is guilty. I would rather suffer punishment than watch the empire fall into the hands of someone who loses his mind over his infatuation with beauty. My father proclaimed, I beg your majesty to depose the Crown Prince and establish a new heir. Behind the 6th prince, numerous ministers simultaneously presented evidence, lists, and ledgers, all stamped with the seal of the Eastern Palace. The Emperor was absolutely enraged. Very well. My Crown Prince has been this impatient to sit upon the dragon throne. You. The Emperor's eyes bulged. He was so infuriated that he passed out right on the dragon throne, falling into a coma. The Emperor fell gravely ill out of anger and ordered the 6th prince to assist in state affairs. Scarlet followed the Empress to tend to his illness, as the Emperor declared he did not want to see the Crown Prince. Thus, Damien ran back and forth by the sickbed day and night, personally supervising the Emperor to ensure he drank every single bowl of medicine prescribed by the Imperial Hospital without missing a drop. Everyone praised him for his loyalty and filial piety, saying he was fully capable of shouldering heavy responsibilities. However, the Emperor's body deteriorated day by day. The Imperial physicians were completely helpless, stating that medicine was useless and fearing he didn't have many days left. Finally, inside the Hall of Supreme Harmony, right above the dragon throne, an edict appeared inside the golden dragon's mouth. Everyone knew that since ancient times, the heir to the imperial throne was written by the emperor in an edict and placed within the dragon's mouth. That night, a fire broke out in the imperial palace. The edict in the dragon's mouth remained completely unharmed, only its position seemed slightly shifted compared to before. The imperial eunuch in charge of cleaning looked closely for a moment but merely assumed he had remembered incorrectly, paying no mind to the dark shadow that flashed behind the dragon throne. 3 days later, Damien raised an army to rebel. His momentum was like splitting bamboo. He mercilessly fought his way straight into the inner palace. The lights in the hall were extinguished, leaving only an eternal flame burning before the dragon bed. That lamp was personally prayed for by Damien at the temple, claiming it was to pray for the emperor's blessings. But now, Damien pointed his finger, commanding his troops. A volley of 10,000 arrows was fired simultaneously, shredding the brocade blanket, only to reveal soft pillows arranged in the shape of a person underneath. Brother Damien, are you really in such a hurry? The hall instantly blazed with light. Arthur stood tall holding a sword. Behind him sat the emperor, completely healthy and illness-free, sitting steadily on his seat. The Empress and I stood on either side, while Scarlet, upon seeing Damien clad in armor and wielding a blade, went limp and collapsed onto the ground. Today, she had entered the hall following the Empress's decree. The Empress had said she pitied her pregnancy and feared she might be bored, so she invited her into the palace to witness a grand spectacle. She came overjoyed, But only now did she realize that the main character of this play was none other than the husband she had pinned all her hopes on. Now, her face was completely drained of blood, her entire body trembling. "You set me up. All of you were plotting against me." Damien's eyes were bloodshot. As if gone mad, he pointed his sword at the emperor and roared. "In what way am I inferior to him? Just because my birth mother was of low status, you despised me for a lifetime. Why was he born a noble crown prince? Why? Even after he committed so many crimes, was the successor's name in the edict still him?" Arthur laughed out loud, throwing a stack of secret letters onto the ground. "Did you really think that merely colluding with powerful ministers to frame me would be enough to overthrow me?" The secret letters scattered all over the floor. They were all letters proving Damien's collusion with ministers to scheme against the crown prince. Every single powerful minister close to Damien had been intentionally guided to him by Arthur. Of course, they were no good people either. These were the exact same sitters who had trampled on the crown prince when he lost power in our past life. I figured that since they were perfectly willing to help Damien frame the crown prince in the past life, then in this life, they would absolutely be willing to help the crown prince scheme against Damien, as long as the price the crown prince offered was higher. And compared to Damien, the crown prince possessed an abundance of both power and financial resources. Naturally, Arthur had already planned exactly how to deal with every single one of them. People with such wicked intentions could simply be discarded once they outlived their usefulness. If not discarded, they would sooner or later become a future disaster. On the very day Damien was executed by beheading, Scarlet gave birth to a baby boy. The infant was born with a cleft lip. Coincidentally, in Horace's household, he also had 3 sons, all born with cleft lips. Scarlet went completely insane. Holding the baby, her hair an absolute mess, she ran straight to the execution grounds, demanding that Damien hold their child just once. The executioners tried to drag her away, but I stopped them. "Husband, look, we have a child," she sobbed deliriously to the condemned man. "Once you ascend the emperor's throne, our child will be the noble crown prince." When Damien saw that terrifying split on the baby's upper lip, he pushed them away violently in sheer panic. Scarlet fell off the execution platform, the back of her head smashing hard onto the ground. She convulsed a few times, then used the very last ounce of her strength to look toward me. I saw nothing but unyielding resentment in her eyes as her lips slightly moved. "Why?" 1 year later, my son was born. The crown prince personally gave him his childhood name Felix. After Felix was born, Arthur became remarkably lazy, frequently lingering in my bed. He wouldn't reluctantly leave until he was almost late for the morning court. As soon as court was dismissed, he would leave immediately, refusing to stay and discuss matters for even a single second longer, running away as fast as a rabbit. The emperor was so infuriated that he personally came to the Eastern Palace. He wanted to see exactly what in the Eastern Palace had stolen the crown prince's soul. As a result, the emperor saw the 3-year-old Felix, plump and soft. Felix grabbed the emperor's beard and babbled in his childish voice, "Imperial grandfather, greetings." After that, the emperor refused to leave either. From then on, Felix was frequently taken by the emperor to the imperial study. At the age of 8, Felix climbed onto the desk in the imperial study. While playing with the imperial jade seal, he pointed out an error in a memorial from the Ministry of Revenue. At the age of 10, Felix was officially anointed as the imperial grandson. By this time, Arthur no longer had any desire whatsoever to attend the morning court. "See," he leaned against you leisurely, flipping through my favorite book of landscape paintings. "I told you, I have a way to avoid being the emperor." Many places in the painting book had been circled over and over by him, saying these were the spots he would take me to travel in the future. I merely smiled, lightly tapping the tip of his nose with my finger. "You. Be careful that when Felix returns, he doesn't scold you again for lacking the proper demeanor of the ruling crown prince." Arthur was most terrified of being caught slacking off by Felix. Every time it happened, Felix would put on a stern face, hands clasped behind his back. With an expression of profound disappointment, he would scold his father. "The northern enemies have not yet been pacified, and Hanzhong is facing a drought. With so many crises in the empire, how can you, as the ruling crown prince, idle away your time here?" Felix lectured so much that he scared Arthur into having nightmares every night. "Good heavens, why is Felix so exactly like my imperial father from the old days?" he would groan. The emperor passed away at the age of 78. The crown prince entered the palace to see the emperor one last time, bringing out the final edict. The emperor's throne was passed directly to Felix, who had just turned 18. By the time we received Felix's letter, we had just set foot in Jiangnan. Arthur said, "The spring here is warm. I want to stay for a while to welcome our second child." During Felix's third year on the throne, the floods in Jiangnan were finally tamed. It was now a peaceful era of calm seas and clear rivers. "Wait until autumn arrives, I will take you to see the autumn skies at Dongting Lake," Arthur promised. "When winter comes, we will go to Luoyang to watch the snow." I laughed, accepting the plate of dried candied fruits he handed me. "Since when did you plan all this? You really thought it through thoroughly." Arthur cast a glance at me, his face brimming with smug pride. "In this life, on the day I lifted that bridal veil and saw it was you, I had already planned everything out. True destiny is never rewritten simply by changing your circumstances or choosing a different partner. It is deeply forged by your character, wisdom, and actions." Scarlet believed that marrying the future emperor would guarantee her the crown, yet her arrogance and cruelty remained entirely unchanged, ultimately sealing her tragic fate once again. Conversely, Luna thrived not merely because of her rebirth, but through her sharp intellect, resilience, and genuine empathy. The profound lesson here is that superficial choices cannot fix a flawed heart. True power and lasting happiness always come from within, cultivated through patience, deep understanding, and unyielding courage. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like,